And then we grow up to be adults who feel very complicated emotions about boundaries because we have no framework from childhood.
Hi! If it is your first time listening, welcome and welcome back to the returning listeners. Today you just heard Bryana, a licensed marriage and family therapist from The Conscious Mommy, who shared her unique perspective on what are boundaries, why it's important to set them, and how to distinguish between power struggle and holding boundaries. Bryana had a lot to share, and she'll give you a lot of food for thought. So let's give the music its place and get started. Welcome to the Playground Talks podcast, a podcast for busy parents who want to own their parenting style and develop a stronger sense of how to handle challenging situations. I am Tamia Friat, your host and a mother of 3. In this podcast, I will interview psychologists, practitioners, behavioral therapists, teachers, and other experts about topics that bother all of us as parents, so you can get both the parenting principles and practical aspects that resonate with you, give you confidence and joy. Hey, Bryana, I'm so happy and excited to have you here. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Tammy, for having me. Always love to have excellent conversations with fellow great human beings. So thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure to have you here. And we want to jump into talking about boundaries. And I want to start with, what do you think about boundaries? How do you look at them? I know you have a great approach.
Absolutely. So I look at boundaries perhaps a little bit differently than some folks. So some folks might identify boundaries as rules or limits. And the underlying idea is that it's to control another person's behavior. I have a boundary because I want to make sure that I am in control of somebody else. And I really fundamentally disagree with the idea that we are even capable of controlling another person, nor is it necessary that we control another person. So I tend to teach boundaries as a bridge that is built between me and somebody else that teaches each other, this is how we get to be in relationship together. So my boundaries are really about me protecting my own needs for safety, physical safety, emotional safety, but also me extending myself in a way that is the most authentic that it can be. So, it's a boundary violation for me if somebody is speaking poorly about somebody else in front of me. I don't like to hear other people being spoken about poorly. So I might have a boundary about that. I understand that it sounds like maybe you're looking for some compassion right now. Sounds like you had a hard time with that person. And I want to be clear that I won't participate in that kind of dialogue. So that's me setting a boundary, but really it isn't about me limiting the other person. It's about me saying, hey, I see you. I see what's going on for you. And this is how I'm willing to be in relationship with that. It's really a beautiful way to structure our relationships and allow us all to feel safe and seen and understood.
I really like how you describe it as an extension for love. Mm-hmm. And I think one of my first posts on Instagram, there was a quote saying, for 2 ropes to make a knot, each one of them must let go part of his length. And what I like about your approach is you're not emphasizing the let go part, like the giving up part, but you are emphasizing the part of, I need to define for myself, what is my rope? What is the part that I'm not giving? Because that's my boundary. That's to define who I am. So I think that's brilliant. And thank you for saying that, which leads me to the next question, which is, why are boundaries so important?
Well, boundaries are essential for every functional relationship. If we do not have boundaries, whether they are physical boundaries around behaviors that don't feel good for us, or even psychological boundaries around psychological ways of being with folks that don't feel good to us, like control or manipulation, emotional abuse, etc. If we do not have those boundaries, we are going to suffer. We will likely feel like we are to blame, we are the fault, and go right into those narratives of look at what a failure I am, look at how bad I am, look, I'm not capable of making this person happy, therefore I must be a failure. And when we're living in that kind of mentality over and over and over again, it really wears us down. It leads to more depression. It leads to anxiety. It leads to really serious overcompensation and just kind of eats away at our joy, takes away the meaning of what we're doing here and why we're here, which I really believe is to find joy in our relationships, to find pleasure in our relationships. Yet their relationships are hard and they're very hard work. And boundaries are an important part of that hard work. For many families that I work with, it's like one or the other. They either had so many boundaries that there was no real emotional connection, because there were even boundaries around like ways to express emotions, that like only anger can be expressed if you're a certain gender, and only anger can be expressed in a certain way, depending on our religious beliefs or our cultural beliefs. So we have that end of the spectrum. And then the other end of the spectrum are the super enmeshed boundaries, or what I like to call boundaryless systems, where there are just no boundaries around personal needs and personal space. And so in those systems, it feels like a real betrayal to have a boundary. You're not loyal to the family and the family culture and the family way by expressing, hey, this is what I need, or this is what feels good to me. So when we really honor boundaries, we honor that every single person on the planet has a right to exist in the way that feels the safest for them. Every single person on the planet has that right. And therefore, every single person has a right to set a boundary that says whether or not something works for them. And I think when we really start to kind of get aligned with this and see this as this is the way to be in relationship with each other, I just think it cultivates so much compassion, so much understanding, and a lot more connection amongst each other. Of course, I teach this concept within the child-parent relationship because this is where boundaries are birthed. Our ability to either set boundaries or hold boundaries, or whether or not boundaries are even allowed, really begins right when the child is put into the parent's arms. Do we accept the child's boundaries around their sleep needs, how the child likes to be fed, how the child likes to play, how the child is exploring friendships, how the child is demanding the ways they'd like to use their time? You know, I think a lot of the times for parents, because this is the primary population that I work with, are parents, is we believe as adults we get to have boundaries, but children don't get to have boundaries. They don't get to have a say in what it is that they need, or they don't get to have a say in how it is that they feel or what feels good for their bodies. And then we grow up to be adults who feel very complicated emotions about about boundaries because we have no framework from childhood. And so it is a bit of a complicated conversation, which is why I'm glad we're having it.
Yeah, and so important one. I want to touch base about something you just mentioned. Like when we have conflict with a child, what a parent who listens to us might ask himself to distinguish whether this conflict is a power struggle or he really trying to set and hold boundaries and help his child to build up his boundaries.
Absolutely. That's a great question. And I want to circle to trust, because trust is fundamental to every healthy relationship. Trust and boundaries. Of course, there are other key fundamental factors, but being able to trust myself, being able to trust the child or any other person that we're in relationship with, we can't have a healthy relationship with them if trust is not there. It is going to be ripe for our own projections, our own expectations, our own needs, and not that bridge that I'm talking about. The bridge that is an extension. This is an extension of my love for you. This is what I'm willing to accept. Where is your bridge? Let me see an extension of your bridge for me. And that is what we are constantly figuring out in relationship with our children. Most of the time, when we are coming into conflict with the child, and it has to do with a parent has one boundary and the child has another boundary, it is a pointless power struggle most of the time. When it is essential that we hold our boundaries with the child is when it has to do with their safety. Otherwise, the vast majority of boundaries that we are setting for our children, which, let's be real, are really just rules and limits and ways that we're trying to control them because we need them to be controllable. So it is convenient and comfortable for us, right? That's actually what the vast majority of us mean when we say, my child doesn't listen to me. What we really mean to say is, my child's not complying with me. Well, they don't listen to my boundaries. Well, what are your boundaries? And then we learned that the boundaries are not also taking into account what the child is also needing. So remember, we go back to the framework. Boundaries are a bridge of us coming together and saying, this is how we get to be in relationship together. My child throwing toys, my child pushing over my other child, my child hitting me. I have some boundaries around that, right? I can't let you hit. I can't let you throw. I can't let you get hands-on with your brother. Absolutely, I have boundaries because all of those circumstances are safety related. I can't let you run in the street. I'm noticing that when we go on family walks, you really can't stop your feet from running. And so when we go on family walks, we're going to have to be in a stroller, or you're going to have to hold my hand until you can really trust your body and I can really trust your body too. It's really important because it's my job as your mommy to keep your body safe. These are all boundaries. And these are all me communicating to the child, this is how we get to be in relationship. As your mother, one of my main jobs is to protect your physical integrity. And this is how I am extending that to you. I have boundaries around the car seats, right? I have boundaries around the pool. All of these things are safety related. But my child, wants to make a mess in his playroom. What is the boundary about then for me? It's about me being in control. Maybe my boundary is we clean up when we're done, but I'm not going to control the process. So I really like parents to kind of think about boundaries as I'm teaching my children how to be in relationship with me. They're teaching me how to be in relationship with them. We are establishing every day this kind of way of being in relationship with the family. That's what we're teaching. So you want to make a mess in your playroom? Okay. The only container that I have for that is when we're done, we clean up. We put things back where they go. And if my child is struggling with that, then I go to my child's need. What is it that they're needing? What's the issue? Did they work extremely hard in building this Lego set and they're just not ready to break it apart? Do they want to put it up high? Did they wait hours for the sibling to not be present in the playroom so they could put together that puzzle? And now they don't want to put the puzzle away because they had to put so much effort and time, not only in the waiting, but then the construction of it. Can I see that in my child and speak to that and honor that and find a way around it?
So it sounds great. And actually in my house, my son also, he likes to build trains a lot. And early on, I think it was 3 or 4, and when he built those huge structure and it was time to clean up, he was really upset and he was trying to run away. And so I asked him, why do you run away? So he said, I'm not willing to ruin all the train I just built. And so we agreed that he's going to clean up whatever is not built. He kept the whole structure, a huge structure, but everything else was cleaned up. And that's what we did. And it worked good, like until today. That's the deal.
Right. and it can be in flex, right? We can be flexible with it. But that was you really honoring his boundary. No, Ma, I don't want to clean this up. This is important to me. I spent a lot of time on this. And this is really the first generation of children where a very small subset, I find, of parents are willing to accept that is perfectly appropriate for a child to say, no, actually, that doesn't work for me. And then it's our job as the parents to say, let me think about that. Actually, you're right. I can totally see why that doesn't work for you. That makes perfect sense. And it's still important that we take care of our things. So let's find a workaround. I was trained in much of my infant mental health training to never allow a child to negotiate at all with a parent. I was trained that a child negotiating with a parent immediately ruins the hierarchical nature of the parent and the child. And it is essential that the parent is always the, dominant person in the child-parent relationship, and they're the authority. And it never felt good for me. I remember how much stress and tension it caused everybody in the room. And I felt like such an imposter, feeling like I'm forcing this societal standard that if you are the parent, you are the authority, you are the ruler, and it is the child's job always to listen, which really now I know what they meant was comply. And that there is no room for the child to say, hey, I have a different way. There was no room for it. Now, this was many years ago, and I do believe that a lot of what we even knew then has continued to evolve. And we are starting to really see the child-parent relationship as one that can actually have a little bit more flexibility. It can be a little bit more attuned. It can have a little bit even more fluidity, where a child being able to express what it is that they need grows into an adult who is comfortable in continuing to express what it is that they need, but also be willing to adapt and accommodate for the needs of others. Because it is something that has been modeled and shown is a safe thing to do in relationships. So the argument that I always get, this is permissive parenting, this is weak parenting, children need to know who's in charge, right? I get all these kind of naysayers pushing up against the idea that a child has a right not to be controlled, and a child has a right to say what works for them too. That we're raising children who are going to be so entitled, children who believe that the world should just acquiesce to everything that they're needing. And I'm adding the dramatic flair to that, by the way. But this couldn't actually be further from the truth. It is the total lack of flexibility, the rigidity, and the hierarchical nature, the authoritarian nature of child-parent dynamics. That is precisely what leads to children feeling entitled to getting what it is that wasn't met in childhood. And it is ironic that we think it is the meeting of the child's needs in childhood when they are the neediest and when they are incapable really of getting their needs met and do rely and depend on adults. That is what would create children who are totally needy and dependent, as opposed to what we have actually been doing, which is rule children, control children, possess children, have a very rigid, do as I say, not as I do, boundaries. And then we have children that are becoming adults running rampant, not having their needs met, not knowing how to be in a relationship where it is mutually satisfying. Because a relationship is two people where both are considered, where both are meaningful and important. I would really like for us as a society to evolve even just a little bit. If in my lifetime we evolve the needle just even a centimeter in this direction, it will make a huge difference for generations to come.
Yeah, I want to emphasize the part that you said that we actually need to teach our kids the ability to negotiate. And we need to show them what is an appropriate way to negotiate. And instead of being really aggressive as a parent, because I'm authoritative and my child needs to comply and be passive, just to transfer this kind of communication to assertive. I'm expressing my own needs as a parent, and I would like you to respect that. And it's mutual with my child as well. And so, as you said, it's such an important tool as they grow up, not to look at the world as I'm either passive or aggressive. I'm either authoritative or I'm a pleaser.
Correct.
It's just a healthier way to operate in the world.
Absolutely. Because when we trust, there we go back to the word trust. When we trust that our needs are going to be considered and met in a safe way in our primary attachment relationships, which is our parents, we don't go out into the world expecting it as much as we go out into the world trusting that it will happen. And I believe there's quite a difference between trusting and expecting. Expectations are going to set us up for failure. They're going to set us up for suffering. When I have an expectation that somebody meet my needs, and my needs were not appropriately seen and cared for in childhood, my expectation is coming from a place of really lack and inadequacy. I'm expecting you to meet my needs because I haven't really effectively learned how to meet my own. And when you inevitably fail, because you will fail, you're not going to know how to meet my needs to the degree that I have fantasized that I need you to do it, right? You won't be able to do that because my expectations are going to be so high. My expectations are going to be like every moment that I am having something, I expect you to be able to read my mind. It's the whole, it's not that I want you to do the dishes. I want you to want to do the dishes. But really what we're saying is, I want you to care for me. I want you to see that I'm struggling. That's really what we're saying. I want you to place my needs before your own. That's what we're saying. And we're saying that and we're expecting that often because it was not adequately met in childhood. This isn't a slam to our parents. Our parents did their best with the information they had, and they were working through their own darkness, their own ghosts. They were dealing with might even stricter, harder, harsher boundaries for our boomer parents. So we really want to appreciate the nuance of this type of discussion and see that the person who is expecting that their needs are met is the person who will 100% suffer and probably cause others to suffer around them. Whereas if I trust that my needs will be met, I believe that relationships are a safe place to be able to mutually get our needs met, whatever they may be, that there is a mutuality about it, that each person is giving for the sake of giving. And then when a limit is crossed, hey, that limit is crossed and we said it, but not in a way to block you out. It's not a wall. It's not a way to say, it's not a way to shame somebody or to push them away. It's a way of saying, oh, that's not how I'd like to be with you. I want to find another way. Can we find another way that feels good for us? Which is ironically a statement that I say to people no matter what their age. I say that to my young children, my 3, almost 4-year-old, my 15-month-old, when he bites me. Oh, I can't let you bite, honey. Let's find another way to be together, as well as adults. I will say it to adults. I don't think this is really working. Can we find another way or find something else to talk about? Or can we find another way to talk about this?
I like the distinguish between saying I'm expecting someone to do something and it's not in my hands. So I'm giving my happiness into someone else. I'm trusting someone else to make me happy. And what you're suggesting is actually to trust the person and also advocate for yourself and say what your needs are. And this way it shifts the whole expectation level to a more tangible thing.
And if the person is a trustworthy person, right? If the person has earned trust in the relationship, and it takes work to earn trust in a relationship. I have many, many women, especially who I work with, who have complicated relationships with their mothers, where there was no room for emotions. The boundaries were basically whatever suited the mother, as a child, there was really no room for the child to have any kind of say. And now as an adult, they really get on their own power by yielding some of that power over the mother in many ways. This now adult woman still has an expectation that mom see her and meet all of her needs, even though they have graduated from that. She's an adult now. And the way that she holds and yields that power is by, well, then you're not going to be able to see your grandkid. So taking away the opportunity to see the grandchild because I'm still holding you accountable for an expectation that you definitely should have done in childhood. But now as an adult, I can't seem to move forward. So there's a lot of healing that needs to be done. And sometimes the boundaries aren't even just what we are putting out for other people. Sometimes the boundary is a personal boundary that we're setting for ourselves. In this case, setting a personal boundary around what I will continue to expect from my mom. Maybe I will expect that my mom doesn't actually understand me. Maybe that is my expectation of her. And my boundary is I'm not going to put things out there to try to get her to understand me. If I share something with her, it is for the sake of sharing it with her because I want her to know me, but not because I expect her to understand me. So we can see that boundaries are about every relationship that we have. The relationship with each other, with our children, and that really important relationship that we have with ourselves.
I want to dig into something because since it's a parenting podcast, I want to hear your thought about why is it so hard for parents to set boundaries and hold the boundaries? What gets in the way of setting boundaries
with their children?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think one of the biggest things that gets in the way with setting boundaries with children is the fear of, being the bad parent because you've set the boundary, or the fear of losing the child's love, and also the fear of like the emotional reaction. It's sometimes just easier to let the child do whatever they want, so I don't have to deal with the emotions. And I think that this becomes quite a problem in the child-parent relationship, because the parent then starts to harbor some resentment toward the child and feels like, that they're a doormat, and their child just walks all over them. And it really just becomes a reenactment of how this parent felt as a child, where they felt walked all over and insignificant and resentful of their parents. And now we're just recreating that same dynamic with our children. And so I think what parents really need to learn the art of, and that's one of the things that I teach, is holding the limit, so holding the boundary, while also holding the feelings, so that both can actually be true. I can have a loving boundary with my child and hold whatever emotional reactions they might be having as a result. And it doesn't take away from my goodness as the parent, and it certainly doesn't take away the child's goodness. I tell parents all the time, well, of course your child reacted. You told them they couldn't have candy. Of course. Duh. They're 5. 5-year-olds are going to try to negotiate. Healthy 5-year-olds, of course. They're going to try to negotiate with you. They're going to try to push back. They're going to say your boundary is not fair. They're going to say they want the candy. They're going to say, well, okay, what if I don't have the chips? Can I have more candy? They're going to do that. Of course they are. That's what we should expect. And then we get the wonderful opportunity to teach the child. And I think so many of us were not raised being taught. So many of us were taught via fear, threats, punishments, and really not acting out because I don't want to upset. I don't want to disturb my parents. Or going on the other end of the spectrum. Well, I don't care. My parents are going to be angry with me anyway. Might as well do whatever I want. So we tend to kind of be extreme in childhood. We tend to be quite black and white. And if we don't have adults teaching us about the nuance of things right from the beginning, if we don't have adults helping us with that, we will grow into adults who are also quite black and white, which is why we are continuing to perseverate on the narrative that parents are the authority and children are the subjects. Children are to be controlled by the authority figure. We have yet to evolve beyond this really black and white, non-nuanced way of seeing our relationships. Whereas I think boundaries bring a much more nuanced way of being in relationship.
I like how you talk all the time about the 2 ages of the spectrum, like the one that grew up as a pleaser. So he used the same pattern with his kids, being a pleaser, afraid of rejecting, being rejected by his own child. And so he's actually in a fear of handling the resistance, the tantrum, because I didn't give my child whatever he wanted. So that's one kind of parent. And then the other one is the one that is more pushy and more authoritative. And he's the one that's the way he grew up. So that's the way he thinks he should operate as a parent with his children. And so it seems like the other spectrum is just really want to control his child, something that you mentioned at the very beginning of our conversation. And I like how you've articulated in a very clear way, so everyone can find himself somewhere on the spectrum and do the work they need.
And really, Tammy, I just wanted to add before you go in, somebody might be both. You might be afraid to set the boundary because you don't want to be displeasing in one particular relationship or with one particular child, especially a child who really pushes your buttons, who can be a little tougher. I don't want to disturb them. And then you might be super controlling over the child who is easily controllable. We can even oscillate between all of these different spectrums here. So I really invite folks who are listening to see themselves in a more complicated and nuanced way, that we're very rarely just one rigid way of being.
That was a brilliant piece to add to the puzzle. Thank you for that. And so continually, with what we said about the spectrum, what you're proposing is saying setting the boundaries is not opposing to also be compassionate and hold feelings for the kids. So as a parent, actually our role is to do the both things, is to set the boundaries for ourselves, model it, help our children set their own boundaries, and we do it while we are being compassionate and ask, what's your need? What do you want? And then help them to understand themselves. And I love this point.
So what I know that you follow me on Instagram, so you know a lot of what I teach is actually for the parent. I have so many parents who come, I have this problem with my kid. How do I fix it with my kid? And I always let them know we have to start with ourselves. We have to start there. So if you're struggling to understand what it is your child needs, most likely you also struggle to understand what it is that you need. If you struggle to extend a boundary for your child and show them this is how we get to be in a relationship together, most likely you also struggle to have personal boundaries for yourself. So I always encourage parents to start with themselves. Something very simple that I know a lot of parents, especially parents with young children, can relate to is feeling touched. Ugh. Kids always on you, right? On my arm, on my legs. If you're nursing, on your boobs, you just got kids always on you. And it can be a little bit of a boundary violation sometimes, right? So a personal space boundary violation to just be climbed all over. You might not like it, but you might somewhere in your mind tell yourself, well, they're just kids. I'm going to let them climb all over me. And there we miss it. This is an opportunity. If in the moment I assess and notice, oh, I'm so touched out. I really think I need some bubble space. I really think it would help me keep my cool. Because we know what happens when we silence that and we say, oh, it's fine. Just let him crawl all over me. 10 minutes into it, we get upset because now we're bringing in an unconscious expectation because we haven't set the boundary. We're bringing in an unconscious expectation that my child read my cues and that they see that I don't enjoy this. But then I stuff it and I stuff it and I stuff it and I stuff it. And what gets repressed gets expressed. So now I'm erupting, I'm exploding, and my kids are like, what's going on? And I'm like, what's going on? I don't understand what just happened here. Well, it's because my boundary was very clear. I knew what I needed. Did I lose you? There you are. My boundary was very clear. I knew what I needed in the moment. I knew that I needed some personal space, but I chose not to speak to it. So I really invite parents to get in touch with themselves. Listen. Your body knows before your brain what boundary it is that it needs. It knows. Listen to it. If it's saying, not right now, communicate that to your children. Kiddos, I know you love pretending I'm Mount Everest. And right now, I need some bubble space. Here's what would really work for me. Let's sit together and we can read a book. And you can sit over here and you can sit over here. Or how about I sit on the couch and you guys find a comfy pillow on the floor and I'll read a story to you. Or if you really need to climb, I'll help you build a fort. I hope when folks listen to this, I hope they feel like, oh, this seems so simple. It's meant to be. I'm not trying to complicate it. I'm really wanting things to feel accessible and simple for us.
Yeah, going back to modeling. So when I'm having my coffee break, the kids knows that's the time. I have 10 minutes. I need my mommy time. It's no one interrupting me. And then I'm more available to them. So I know for me, it's the best and also for my kids. And I think what you are emphasizing by modeling is that now your kids is also feel comfortable sharing their needs. So it's...
Oh, yeah. My son tells me all the time, you know what, Mommy? That's just not feeling good for my body right now. I think my body really, really needs a little bubble space. I'm going to go to my bedroom. Okay.
It's so cute.
And so, it's really wonderful to just kind of watch and see how he's navigating his own personal needs. And I think it's so brilliant, especially me raising boys who know how to navigate their own personal needs, who know how to get their needs met, be less demanding and controlling of women to do it for them as they get older, which is the societal standard. Definitely helps open up a conversation around consent, which is a really essential boundary between partners, especially as our children get older and start to explore different aspects of their humanness. And another message that I want to get to parents, it doesn't matter how old your child is. I don't care if you have adult children. It's never too late for you to start reimagining how you might have boundaries with them, or how you might even talk about the way you were if it hurt them in any way, and find some healing and reestablish a new way, and then work toward those mutual goals. It's literally never too late.
You actually just answered my question, because the other day my friend told me, well, my kid, she has a teenager daughter, and she's like, she's a teenager, and I didn't set enough boundaries until now. I think it's too late. And then that's perfectly answered. It's never too late. Just work on it whenever and start establish it. I guess that the older they get, you have more resistance that you have to deal with.
The other way of saying that is the more flexible you need to be, because they're more in tune with what it is that they need. And they are going to have ways to get their needs met that you may not agree with. And as long as it's not disrupting your child's safety, it's not putting their life in danger, it bodes well for you to explore it with them, even if you know they might suffer a consequence because of it. So long as they're not going to jail, right? You might want to deter your child from going to jail or committing some kind of criminal act. But most of the time, that isn't the case. Most of the time, it is them doing very normal experimentation, and life is always going to be the greatest teacher, not you. You will be a secondary teacher to life itself. We have to be, and that's part of trusting. That's part of trusting ourselves and trusting our children.
We're being the support system.
That's right. Always a safe haven for them to return to.
Thank you for coming and sharing all those things that, well, I personally haven't thought about, but you helped me kind of organize my thought around boundaries and what's get on my way to set boundaries. So thank you so much for coming and sharing.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Have a great day.
You too.
Hey, thanks for listening. I hope you got some food for thought. We started with what are boundaries, and Bryana shared that boundaries is not about controlling someone's behavior, feelings, thought. It's about building bridges, which is a way to structure our relationship and allow us to feel safe and seen and understood. We also mentioned it is never too late to start setting and holding boundaries, and it's important to do so because this is the essential for a functional relationship. If we don't set boundaries, then you might suffer because no one ever meets your expectation, and so you're always disappointed and you suffer. You may also feel like you are the one to blame. So lack of boundaries leads to more depression and anxiety. We talked about two sides of the spectrum. The one is that you may have experienced as a child that there were so many boundaries, even about what you wear and who do you meet, and even about how to express your emotions. The other part is boundary-less system, where there were just no boundaries around personal needs and personal space. And it felt like a betrayal to start and have those boundaries, like you're not loyal to the family or the family culture. So as we grow up, there's something in our way to set those boundaries, and this is the fear of someone else's reaction. If we experience the too strict environment, we're feeling that by setting boundaries, we wouldn't be able to control someone else's behavior. And on the other hand, we could feel that we'll be rejected and we'll feel insecure because we got used to be a pleaser. So either way, what's in our way to set the boundaries is the fear of handling the resistance of the person that we are standing in front of. Obviously, that's not a healthy relationship, and Bryana mentioned that it doesn't matter how your childhood looked like. The healthy way is to express your needs and say, hey, that's what I need, and that's what makes me feel good and safe. And so this way, if we build those relationships and honor the boundaries of each other, everyone feels safe. And that's why boundaries are the foundation for healthy relationship. And then it cultivates compassion, understanding, and connection among each other. The last thing we talked about was what's the distinguish between power struggle and setting boundaries. And Bryana mentioned that whenever a conflict is related to a safety issue, then it's your responsibility as a parent to set the boundaries. Otherwise, you may want to respect your child boundary, for example, around what to eat, how much to eat, if to take a long or short shower. Those are things that we want to respect our child boundaries and let them even negotiate it. In the show notes, you can find Bryana's links to her website. She has workshops and she has an online replay. Thanks again for listening. If you find it helpful, please help me spread those nuggets of wisdom and share it with your friends. Send them the link to the episode or share your takeaways from the episode and subscribe. Bye!